You read that thing, John, before other people?
Yeah, I have to read that. I can read it now.
Yeah, get that out of the way.
Okay. A checklist to ensure meetings are compliant with the right to know law during the state of emergency. As chair of the Lyme Planning Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to executive order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which is authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone, 888-788-0099, meeting ID 680-832-1113. No password is required, or by clicking on the following website address, https://zoom.us/j/. Oh, and after the J comes 6808-321113. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, including how to access the meeting telephonically. Instructions have also been provided on the website, www.lymenewhampshire.gov planning board. lymenewhampshire.gov/planning dashboard. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please call 1-603-795-2661 or email at zoning@lymenh.gov. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Rich.
Oh, I am Rich Brown. I am here alone.
Tim.
I am here. Lynn may walk through the room at some point, but she's not in the room.
Okay, and Vicky.
So Vicky Smith, and I'm here alone.
Okay, and I'm John Stadler, and I'm here alone. So I'll note, first of all, David, they're telling me my internet connection is unstable. What else is new? David Robbins is on vacation, so he will not be with us tonight. I will be taking minutes, so bear with me if I'm going slowly. So the people who are missing, obviously David, Kevin Furstenberg, Kevin Saar, Eric Furstenberg, David Van Wee, and Rich Mengi. Do we have any public? All right, so really the main thing on the agenda, does anybody have changes on the minutes?
I had a couple typos, but.
Okay.
John, I didn't get the minutes. I got the agenda, but I didn't see the minutes attached.
I think David sent that a while ago. He sent them like a couple weeks ago.
Oh, was it? All right. Okay.
Okay, hold on. We have a public and Eric joining. Okay. Just hang on a second. Okay. Hello, Eric. I guess. Eric, can you hear us?
No.
Apparently not. Can you hear us, Eric?
Maybe his sound is off.
Hi, Jackie. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jackie.
Wave, Eric, wave if you can hear me. Jackie, wave if you can hear me. Okay, good. Okay.
You're breaking up a little bit, John.
Yeah.
All right.
And it looks as if Jackie has muted herself by clicking the mute button in the lower right.
Okay, so let's, Jackie, thank you for joining us. We're going to get, I assume you're here for senior housing. So we're going to get to that shortly. Eric, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, my internet has been really flaky the past couple days, so it's probably going to go in and out.
Okay. So Eric, we have to by law ask you to identify yourself and whether there's anybody in the room with you.
Eric Furstenberg, there's no one in the room with me.
All right. Cleared that up. Okay, so let's get back to the minutes and then we'll move on.
Okay. So I had a few typos, John. You want me to?
Yeah, are they just minor or substantive?
Pretty minor. I did have one question though on the last page, page 4, under item 4, the first sentence there, planning and zoning administrator stated that based on his preliminary findings, he was looking into a new mythology. I just, for my own information, what does that mean, mythology, to account for?
I think methodology.
Methodology, yes.
Okay, because it's I think he spelled it mythology.
Yeah, it should be methodology.
Okay, well that clears that up. Yeah,
Okay.
I just thought he was going into some Greek Greek stuff or something, you know.
Right.
But otherwise, I just had a few typo, you know, if you set, or like on the first page, 1, 2, 3, 6th paragraph down, John appointed David Van Wee. At the end, it should say, felt that Mr. Van Wee should continue in his place. Just take out the B.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last paragraph on page 1, Ray commented that he had not planned on changing landscaping very much as he wanted to allow the owners of the units to decide on their own landscaping. Just added 2. That makes sense.
I didn't follow that.
I think we just have to add a 2 after the units.
Could you read it again?
Ray commented that he had not planned on changing the landscaping very much as he wanted to allow the owners of the units to decide on their own landscape.
Oh, okay.
Added 2. And then the only other one that maybe this, page 2, the very first sentence, Vicky suggests that the board require a copy of the condominium association documents that will be submitted to the Secretary of State's office to be submitted to the town. Put in a the maybe.
Sure.
Okay, that's all I had.
All right, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended by Tim. Vicky seconds, or do you have is that a second?
Second,
Yeah, okay. So all those in favor, we have to do it by roll call, sorry. All right, Tim?
Yes.
John, yes. Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
yes.
Rich? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know whether you were appointed, but anyway, go ahead, Rich.
Yes.
Okay, so those are approved. Okay, so let's go to senior housing. Too bad that Kevin and David Van Wearen and Rich Mengy proposed to do. We did get feedback from town council. I'll go into that later. Does it meet with the board's approval if I think it's since we haven't really gone over this line for line since last season, let's go over it line by line, and then people can comment as we go along. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, sounds good.
Is there anybody who doesn't like that?
So John, I wanted to ask, that partially answers the question that I was going to ask, which is how did you want to plan for this discussion to go?
That's how I would like to do it.
Has anyone else submitted comments to you?
Nobody else. David Robbins told me that Rich Mengy is in the Maine wilderness, but that he was going to submit comments, but if they came in after David was on vacation, we wouldn't get them. So he may have, but I don't have them. Okay, so I did send you a few cogent comments, I think relevant comments anyway. Yeah, so with this arrangement, you can ask your questions as we go along, okay? Hello? Sure, yes, let's go. Okay. And Jackie, if you have a comment, since it's an intimate setting tonight, just raise your hand and unmute and join in. Actually, John, before we get into it, I guess I did want to ask, is there a reason that you didn't distribute my comments to the other members? It's David's responsibility to distribute your comments, not mine. I see. Although, and I don't send emails to the whole group. Okay, would you have, if David had been here, would you have forwarded them along? No, David would have. I mean, but would you have approved them to be forwarded along? Because it's not my call, it's David's. It would have been fine with me is my answer. Okay, thank you. Okay. And when we get to the relevant parts, if you want to read from the relevant part of your submission, go ahead. Thank you. Okay, definitions for Article 2. Senior housing and arrangement of dwelling units designed exclusively for seniors is set forth in Article 13. Senior, a person at least 62 years of age. Any comments? Yes. Okay. The note that I sent is one of the questions I asked is that we discuss the age requirements for senior housing. I remember a comment coming up in the previous discussion that 55 is too young for me. Who was me? I believe it was you, John, but I don't remember that for certain. But when we were discussing... I don't think I said that. I wouldn't have put it that way. But I distinctly remember there being a sense that 55 was too young for senior housing. And so I guess I would like somebody to describe to me a bad outcome that would result from having senior housing following the federal standard that says that at least 80% of the occupied units must be occupied by at least one person 55 years of age or older. So. Okay, so I guess I would ask, we've been over this probably 100 times. We went over the HOPA provisions. Is there anybody on the board who's present who would like to use the HOPA provisions instead of the 62 and over? I guess I would like to hear a description of a bad outcome that would come from using the HOPA standard.
I'd like to just comment. I mean, maybe we should call it the super senior housing. I think that what we're trying to do is provide for affordable units for people who really are of retirement age. and might have reduced income and therefore be looking to downsize and be, closer to, a retirement age and a reduced income.
Mm-hmm. And so what bad effect would there be for using the HOPA standard?
Well, if
I
the
think
people,
yes, sorry.
I guess, just looking at my own experience, that you are in a market where you have people that are not necessarily fixed income, they are still gainfully employed.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is supposed to be, this isn't quote affordable, but we're trying to, make it so that we have increased density so that it would be more affordable, that we would be targeting a group of people who are truly retirement age and not still gainfully employed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think remembering what we discussed before, it seemed like at one point we were saying that 55 is not really a senior anymore. I mean, somebody 55 is not really considered a senior.
The feds do, that's the federal law. So
No, it's not the federal law for seniors. It's for older persons. That's why it's called HOPA. It's for older persons. That part of it that applies to seniors is specifically for seniors. And we've had this discussion endlessly already. And, I understand you don't agree with the rest of the board, but if I'll say briefly, I was interested in HOPA at one point, but the standards are such that enforcing it is extremely difficult. If you have somebody who is the person who's 55 or older in a particular unit and they move, there's a divorce, or they die, the town should not be in the position of enforcing that. And the most important thing that came out to me during all the discussions we had last year and previously was that the 62 and over was what I was interested in, and the public feedback seemed to be consistent with that. And we have basically gone over this a million times. I would prefer not to go over this endlessly again. And given that nobody else on the board wants to have HOPA, I would recommend that we move on from this question since it's been answered.
Could this be a vote?
Well, I think, no, we don't have to vote, but nobody else on the board agreed with you.
Okay.
Vicki.
I'm just wondering what Rich's interest is in, moving down to 55. What are the benefits?
I think it's actually to the contrary of what John said, and I think it's easier to enforce. It's clearly well tested.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not talking about testing. What are the benefits to the town with 55?
So the benefits are, Vicki, that it's easier. It is a one sentence and insertion into the language of the ordinance. There are several paragraphs here that go that talk about ages and numbers of people, and frankly, and so it simplifies the language of the ordinance with language that is widely used, clearly well understood. I don't specifically know of the concerns that John has regarding enforcement.
So I'll tell you what. So you tell me, how is Lyme would Lyme enforce a 55 and older? I mean, this is exactly the rabbit hole I don't want to go down here with you, Rich, which is what you tend to do when there's a consensus on the board. Take us in a completely different direction. But I'll give you a few minutes on this. And on HOPA, the whole board last year unanimously decided we wanted to do 62 and over because that is what that group of the board, which was unanimous, considered as the most worthy, needful group of specific enabling. The problems with enforcing HOPA, you tell me what happens when you have 10 units, two of the units are regular, the other 8 have one 55 or older, and it so happens that with a couple of those units, the 55 and older person leaves. Do you kick those people out because they don't qualify?
So I think the same, I asked the question on the other side. The language of the current proposal says both no more than 2 people may live in the unit. Both of them must be over 62. It seems to preclude the option of having a family member or a live-in aide come and live to help. If that's the board's intention.
Which is why it has a 70% requirement with 30% mixed use available, because that's consistent with the senior law. But you still haven't answered the question of how Lyme will enforce a very complex and emotionally wrenching situation. I'm not interested in putting the town in a position of doing that.
I think, John, the answer is the same way they would enforce it if a person moved into a unit to help their parent. If 2 qualifying people, a couple, had a death and a child wanted to move in, that's not possible. How will the town enforce that? It's the same, it devolves to the same problem.
It's not the same because there are clear parameters. The person could live in the same development in a different apartment, and a person who lived in Lyme could either go there, could certainly stay over. They can't claim residency.
I think it's a poor choice.
I understand that, Rich, but nobody else on the board does, and I'm going to move on.
Well,
I'm going to move on. I don't want to spend all day on this. You have had your time to discuss this, and I would like to move on. Is there anybody on the board who would like to discuss this more?
So the other members of the board, it sounds like the other members of the board agree with you, John. I am happy to continue the discussion on the next point.
Good. Article 13, senior housing is a residential use suited to the needs of seniors located close to municipal and social services and facilities and designed to facilitate independent living with an emphasis on safety and accessibility. The exterior appearance and massing of any structure associated with the senior housing must be harmonious and consistent with the present character of the neighborhood. So any comments on that? Vicki?
Yeah, I just thought that the second sentence should actually drop down to be one of those criteria with those little alphabetical, listing, because it's actually kind of a criteria. And then I would also like to, so whatever number it becomes, it probably fits more into, near H or something like that, because that has to do with, the appearance or, whatever. But I also would like to add as determined by, so that it would read the same with the exterior appearance, blah, 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 with the present character of the neighborhood as determined by. And who makes that determination? And I want, that blank to be filled in. I don't know if it's going to be the historical society or the zoning administrator or the zoning board or the planning board, but somebody needs to make that determination, and I think we need to identify that person in this
Well,
draft.
who would you, I mean, as it's written now, it would be the planning board.
Your site plan review, right, Vicky? What do you mean?
Well, this is I want to be sure that that's clear, that it's the planning board's decision.
Well, whose decision do you think it should be?
Well, I mean, just that's why I'm throwing it out there. I like the planning board. I don't know if the, historic people want to deal with, aesthetics and more design stuff. We're talking about only in the Lyme Common District, which is also the historic district. So they may be better suited to make that determination, but I just want to say who should that be? And I don't, we just need to identify somebody. I think it's better to be a appointed or elected board than it would be for, David to make that. So I would think David Robbins would not be fair. I think it should be made by a board of people.
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the legal status of the relationship with the historical, is it a society or a commission or what?
Well, we both, right?
Yeah, it's not appointed though.
It's voluntary. What's that, Tim?
The Lyme historians is not, or I should say it's not voted. It's not a voted.
Well, maybe we could do as determined by the planning board, having received a recommendation by the Lyme historians or something like that.
Yeah, or maybe the Heritage Commission, because the Heritage Commission is appointed by the selectmen.
Okay, well,
It's appointed by the selectmen?
Yeah, the Heritage Commission is. And the Heritage Commission is more of a formal commission sanctioned by the state. The Lyme historians is just basically a group of people that get together.
okay. Well, that's good. I mean, I'm just thinking, I didn't really know who we should have it. So it could say as determined by the planning board, having considered a recommendation from the Heritage Commission.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Vicky. Yeah, I think it's good.
So I mean, we're just talking about this. It's that's a draft, and maybe next time we get together, we'll say, oh, that sounds terrible. I think we'd want to get some input from the Heritage Commission to see if they want to serve in that role. But I just think we need to, make it clear who's making the decision and what they're considering.
Okay, so we'll have that as provisional and have further discussion about that, and that would probably go after H.
Okay, great. Yep, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
So just for clarity, Vicky, you're suggesting that the second sentence in that paragraph, the exterior appearance, would appear after point H?
Yeah, somewhere in the criteria.
Okay, something like that. Okay.
Kind of like a way to evaluate the proposal.
Yep, I see what you're saying.
Okay. Any other comment on that? Okay, a senior housing development must meet all the requirements for a site plan review under section 1210, as well as the following criteria. A, senior housing may be located in one or more buildings on a lot or on a portion of the lot within the Lyme Common Zoning District.
And John, I wanted to speak to that as well. This is Rich.
Okay, go ahead.
And so I guess I ask, why is it important to constrain it to the Lyme Common District? What are the characteristics of senior housing that make it unsuitable for other parts of town? And what would the bad outcomes be if senior housing were permitted elsewhere in town?
Does anybody want to answer that besides me?
I think we've been maybe, or at least I've been thinking maybe we should include the commercial district, or at least some of it.
Well, that was our plan this year before COVID, was to do the build out for the southern part around the commercial district, to see if we could expand that and possibly other uses.
Right.
But we haven't gotten the build out yet.
Right. I mean, the obvious advantage of having it on the Lyme Common is that it's in walking distance to so many things. I think it's just closer into town.
Well, but I think that that's not actually borne out by the facts. I think of everything on Orford Road, I think of everything on High Street, and I think of everything on Dorchester Road. Those parts that are in the Lyme Common District are frankly not very walkable to town.
I find that confusing, Rich. So you're saying because some areas are less walkable, that it doesn't make sense to concentrate it in a central area with a lot of conveniences, because some areas are less accessible than others? Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that if you allow it up on High Street, for example, those people will have to drive.
So you're saying it would be a little less convenient up there?
I'm saying that it would not, the walkability argument doesn't make sense.
So how much of the common do you think is unwalkable, percentage-wise?
Whatever percentage is on Dorchester Road, on High Street, and on Orford Road.
Okay, well, I think there's a substantial portion of the common that is walkable. I suspect that your definition of what's walkable and mine will be different. But the other thing is that having it concentrated in the common where things are central, even for people who if there were developments in areas where it was slightly less accessible, you would still be in a concentrated area where neighbors would have easy access to help the seniors. And in putting it in other areas, you definitely would have to drive. And I also think that having it in the common makes sense for all of those reasons, but also gives us a chance to see how it'll work. And that if we do find that it needs to be expanded, it will be based on real evidence instead of whatever it is, however you would define your points.
So I guess what I'm saying, I'm certainly not objecting to it being in the Lyme Common District. I'm just saying that from the walkability standpoint, there are lots of other places that are just as accessible because because residents would need to drive.
I think,
That doesn't make any sense.
I'm 64 and I walk, I'm above 62 and I walk around all the time.
So, and I actually did the experiment. I got my GPS unit out, and I started at High Street, walked down Orford Road, walked up Dorchester Road and back, and it's about 1.7 miles. Dorchester Road is a bad road. It would be unwise to have senior housing. It would be unwise to expect anybody in senior housing to walk up and back down Dorchester Road. I mean,
I walk that all the time. I'm 64, okay?
Yeah, and you know, and Vicky, you're an incredibly vital person. To say that senior housing, by virtue of being in the Lyme Common District up Dorchester Road, is walkable is not true. I mean, it's
Rich, I'm gonna, and first of all, the walkability was one issue that was discussed. And again, last year, we went through this over and over again, and you brought up the same points.
Yep.
And the board voted unanimously to do this.
okay.
I don't think anybody's opinion has changed. We also said at that time that we were going to start with the Lyme Common and that we were going to look at other areas, which we are doing now. But
Okay.
I think the wise thing to do, because any major zoning amendment has unforeseen issues, is to start with what makes sense and then expand outwards rather than start willy-nilly everywhere and then find out, oh my goodness, this was a bad idea, let's cut it back. We're starting prudently and intelligently. I disagree with your approach.
Okay.
And unless there's anybody else on the board who agrees with Rich's approach, I'd recommend that we move on. Is there anybody who agrees with Rich?
Just one comment. I think that I agree. Dorchester Road. I wouldn't want to walk up and down Dorchester Road to the Common. And one of the things I take away from the past 5 minutes is that perhaps the Common is too large an area to start with. The Common District is too large an area to start with. If there are areas in the Common District that are not walkable to the businesses on the Common, then perhaps that's too large of an area. So I don't think we're talking about that, but I think that the arguments being made support that as a conclusion more than anything else.
Well, I would agree that I mean, the idea that because an area in the designated region isn't as walkable as other areas, we should expand it to definitely unwalkable areas. Doesn't make any sense. But the reason that we included the whole Common was because it was a practical decision. And realistically, if somebody was going to build in an area, whether it's Dorchester or somewhere else that didn't make sense to build in, I just don't think that they're going to do it. They're going to want to do it, unless they want to appeal to seniors like Vicky, they'll do it in an area of the Common that will be self-defining for the targeted group. So if they're building for seniors who are going to really need more accessibility, they'll probably focus on areas with more accessibility.
I have to say,
All right.
my mom, who's in her 80s, comes and visits, and we walk around that block. That's her morning walk before breakfast. And she's no superhero. She's a, little old lady who walks every day. And the hill is challenging. So, sometimes we go just along Route 10 and then go up High Street and come down the hill.
Okay, no, you convinced me. All right, so we're going to move on because there's no support for that point. Okay, so we were up to B. C, the number of senior housing units on a lot shall not exceed 10. I'll take that as nothing. Okay. D, dimensional controls such as lot coverage, building footprint, property, and road setbacks and gross floor area may be relaxed by the planning board through site plan review based on the character of the land and the neighborhood. Adequacy of the site to support domestic water supply, water for fire suppression, and on-site wastewater disposal, safety of access for vehicles and pedestrians, and other characteristics of the site relating to its use and enjoyment. Vicky.
Well, I just wanted to point out that, some structures, buildings on the common, their well actually is not on the site. So I think there needs to be something said about shared wells or water supply, just to reflect the current situation here.
Could you come up with language for that?
Yeah, if everyone supports that, I would. Yeah. So it'd be, the water supply both for, drinking and for fire suppression, both. I would think, though, that in some cases that, like for fire suppression, the choice might be to put in a cistern. And so would that count as, the cistern would be put on site so they have that source of water, but it wouldn't necessarily be coming from, it wouldn't be coming from the ground, like, at the same time that it was needed. So, I just want to, point those things out. But yes, I'll draft something that would say that it could be supplied. And I know we used to have the Lyme fire, the Lyme water company or something. I don't know what they're called now.
You're talking about just properties that are not served by the water company, right?
Well, I'm talking about, this says adequacy of the site to support domestic water and, water for fire suppression. And some people don't even have their own wells. They're cooked into a communal system that is shared with 2 or 3 houses.
Right. Well, my understanding, and I remember several years ago, we talked about the town water supply system, and they were saying at the time that there's more water than they need. I mean, they have a lot of water.
Right. So,
a whole extra thing they're not even using, I think.
Right. So what we've got here is something that says it's got to come from the site, and what I think intend is that it could come from that communal system, whatever it is.
Right.
And
what if it just said adequacy to support domestic water supply, water for fire suppression, and wastewater disposal?
I would like it better is adequacy of domestic water supply and water for fire suppression. And then a different thought is adequacy of on-site wastewater disposal. Because the water would come from not necessarily the lot, could come from off-site, and then, but the wastewater should be on-site.
We could say availability of domestic water.
That would work. Yep.
So I'm going to make a radical.
Or the common.
I'm going to make a suggestion for radical simplification, and that is to strike everything after the word site plan review, because virtually everything after those words recapitulates the requirements of the site plan review. You've got to meet site plan review, no kidding, obviously, and character of the land, adequacy of all these things, fire safety, those are all detailed by site plan review. Maybe it would be stronger just to say dimensional controls, such as all those things, may be relaxed by the planning board through site plan review, period.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rich, actually. I mean, that is all covered in site plan review. It's just whether we want to reiterate it is all.
Well, but you see, the problem is if you say it again, people have to meet both the words here in section D as well as everything in site plan review. And if there's a conflict or if there's confusion, it muddies things.
So here's what I think that's certainly an interesting point. Vicki, I'd like to ask you to designate you to figure that out, basically. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, no, and I want to look and see exactly what site plan review says. I think Richard's a good one, and I'll look and make sure it says all these things and that it doesn't say on site necessarily. So I'll think of something and send it to David Robbins, and he can distribute it.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. E, senior housing dwelling units may be no larger than 1,200 square feet.
And again, this is one of the points that I wanted to discuss. The limitation on 1,200 square feet seems to me to be an arbitrary constraint. I don't remember exactly where that came from, and why is it important that it be 1,200 square feet and no more?
I believe it came out of discussions about trying to make sure, I think it was with Brett Ryan, we were having these discussions about trying to keep prices as low as feasible. And the likelihood that developers would be, let's just say, tempted to maximize the outcome for them by, for instance, if you had I don't know how big, but you know, if you had 3,000 square foot units, would preclude, would make it more expensive and not have any small units available. So I remember originally we were talking about having an average size for the dwelling units, and I believe the 1,200 was what we all compromised on at the time. How do other people feel about this?
Well, we are limited. The maximum building footprint and gross floor area is 12,000. So if you had 10 units at 1,200, that would be the 12,000.
Yeah, that's where the figure came from.
Right.
Well,
I guess you could, as you say, John, I mean, if a developer wants to maximize, I mean, they could put in, if we didn't have the 1,200 foot rule for the maximum dwelling unit, they could put in four, what would that be? 3,000 foot.
Right.
But they wouldn't, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. It wouldn't be affordable at that point.
Well, I mean, I don't even think affordable is the word. It would just be very expensive.
Yeah, I think that defeats what we're trying to do here.
I'm sorry, Eric, you were breaking up there. Say
Yeah, I
again.
didn't hear that.
I think that defeats what we're trying to do here to allow 3,000 square foot units.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd like to provide as much flexibility as possible, and we could use an average. But last year we discussed that, and people preferred the 1,200. So if there was an average, we could have, you know, somebody could have a, you know, a combination of units that would average out at a certain number to make sure that the smaller units or more affordable units would be built.
So are we allowed to talk about the case from 4 weeks ago?
Yes.
Meeting?
I don't see any reason why we can't.
Yeah.
So I'm looking
Does
at that.
anybody see why we shouldn't do that? Go ahead, Eric.
I'm looking in the in the main building where the 4 units will be located, and 2 of them are 1324 and 2 of them are 1164. So those average a little over 1,200, but you know, one is over and one is under.
Right, and just for completeness, Eric, the 5th one in the barn is, or in the garage, is something like 1,500 square feet.
I think it was actually 1,600.
Okay.
Might
Yeah,
have been
I didn't even get to that page. But my point is that I think allowing a little variation is fine. I think in the building having you know, if it's set up so that the dwelling units may be no larger than 12,000 and maximum floor areas are 1,200 and 12,000, then they're all going to be the same size. So I think allowing a little variation is a good thing.
So what about using an average?
Yeah, because I think if
It
someone's
allows a little more flexibility, you know, like if you got an old structure where you can't make them all be exactly the same size.
right, that's what I was going to say, Eric. If you're using an old house, it might be pretty limiting to actually not be able to go over 1,200 square feet at all because it may not work out with the building.
So how do people feel if we say senior housing dwelling units? Well, we'd have to rewrite it, but we say they would have to average out at 1,200 square feet a unit, or for all the units. Did you do that, Vicki?
Yep, I can tell you I've been shopping for senior housing with my mom, and 1,200 is very adequate in terms of size.
Well, that's the other reason that we came up with 1,200. You know, I got information I spoke to Lenore Bolton, and she got me information. I don't know whether it was Quail Hollow or whatever, but I got all of the average units, and they were 1,200 was plenty.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're trying to keep these. I mean, I don't know how affordable these would be. If we get 10, they'll be more affordable. But we're trying to keep these. We're trying to keep the price down.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the point about flexibility is a fair point.
Although, you know, I may walk back on that one a little bit because it's easy to make a unit smaller, right? That's not what we're talking about. So if we're not constraining, suppose it's an old building, the constraint is not going to force you to have an apartment that's too big. It's easy to chop a closet off and make it smaller if you need to, right?
All right, so let me poll people about.
Before you do that, John, I had a question. Vicki, when you were looking around for places for your mom, what other amenities came with those units? Was there any common space?
In every case, there was common space that you could use, but each of the unit was whole with kitchen, sanitary, you know, bathroom, and all that. The only kind of variation was whether or not there was a washer and dryer separate in the unit, or if you had shared washer dryer space.
Okay.
But everything else, and then in every case, there was also common areas for sitting, common areas for dining. Yeah, and some common outdoor areas.
So do we want our proposal to allow for sitting, dining areas?
Well, I believe that we do. We do.
Yeah, next one. So, you know, the next one I was going to say that double I maybe would say interior common areas shall not be counted as residential square footage.
Okay.
Okay.
And also I think it's unclear. Well, we should go back to the one. I mean, I guess the thing is, do we want to have the average be 1,200 square feet? You know, we looked at units that were 600 square feet, and we looked at units that were like 2,000 square feet. I mean, she's just a single person. And the 1,200, you can get 2 bedrooms, 2 baths really easily, and have plenty of storage in your unit and all that. So I think that's it's very generous, the 1,200 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a senior at the time, but I lived in 600 square feet in my first place I lived in New York, and the second place was 700, and my wife and I lived there, and I had my office under the raised bed. So this is a lot bigger than that.
I will say, I think the challenge is, I mean, you were just starting out, so you hadn't accumulated so much junk. These older, you know, my mom, she's 87. She's got stuff she cares about, and it's like, really? And she's not on this call, and she's not in the house listening to me, but it's like unbelievable what like kind of needed to come. And so I'm, you know, that is a problem with, I think, people. They have a hard time shedding the physical trappings of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right. I'm just to put my opinion in, I think 1,200 is a reasonable average. So I'm not kicking against that.
Okay. So, so how do people feel about 1,200 as an average or 1,200 as a limit?
I think it would be beneficial to have it as an average, because I just think, you know, looking at it from a construction standpoint, as I was saying, if you have an existing building, it may be pretty limiting. There may be one area that you had to make it 1,280 or something, you know, just because that's the way it worked out the best. You know, I think it's going to be difficult in an existing building to conform exactly to that 1,200 or be exactly below that 1,200.
Okay.
I mean, what do you do if you've got, you know, 2,500 square feet to split up between two units? You know, so yes. So the answer is, I mean, a good solution is to have an average.
Yeah.
Well, but if you had 2,500 square feet, even with the average, you'd still be in the same situation, wouldn't you? Or is my math off?
Well, you have to have a 100-foot common area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so I'd like to get Eric and Vicky's point of view.
I'm happy with the average.
Eric?
The average is fine with me.
All right. And you're okay, Rich, right?
Yeah, with the average, yes.
Okay. So senior housing dwelling unit, we're going to have to rewrite this. I don't, you know, language will have to change, but senior housing dwelling units shall average no more than something like that, than 12.
Excuse
No more than 1,200 square feet.
Right.
Okay, and then double I is interior common areas shall not be counted as residential square footage within the principal structure.
Well, I would just say period, because if it's interior, then it's already in it, right? So interior common areas should not be counted as residential square footage.
Okay.
And in a way, I mean, it avoids a problem that I came up when I was thinking about this. If you've got more than one structure, which is the principal structure? You know, so I don't even want to go there in case there happen to be two buildings on the site, both of which have senior housing. I don't want to go which is the principal. So we just say interior common areas, which is what I think we need to say, you know, for those sitting areas, for the hallways, if there's a communal kitchen, something like that.
Okay, that's a very good point. All right, triple I. And I have a question about this one. The maximum building footprint and maximum gross floor area of all buildings and accessory structures on the lot shall not exceed 12,000 square feet. I brought this up last time and I was way off with my numbers, but anyway. I recall last year when we were talking about this that both Vicky and Rich had a problem with the 12,000 square feet building footprint for different reasons. But regardless of whether my memory is accurate, I know what we wanted to do by allowing for a 12,000 square foot building footprint. We wanted to allow everything on one floor to help with affordability. But I've been thinking about, and this was something that Vicky pointed out, that footprint for a single floor is enormous. And I'm just thinking about the impact of that in the common. I looked up on the tax cards or the tax data to get this information, so I assume it's accurate. But so for Pondview Apartments, their living area, which is all on one floor, and that's not the gross area, that's the living area, is 7,200 square feet. So I'm wondering whether we want to have the 12,000 square foot, or do we want to have 9,000 or even 6,000? The Lyme Inn, the floor, first floor is 4,700 square feet, and the Lyme Clinic, the first floor is 3,000 square feet, just for some comparisons. I wanted to see what people thought about that building footprint size in the common.
John, I got behind. Would you say those numbers again? The Lyme Inn is?
Yeah, so these numbers are from the tax data, so.
Yeah.
you
No,
know,
I just didn't get the numbers down
the
accurate.
Pondview's 7,200 living area.
Yeah.
And that's one floor Pondview as far as I know. The Lyme Inn said the first floor was 4,728. So that's not all the living area, that's just the first floor.
Right.
These are comparisons just for scale and
Yeah, exactly. Good.
such. Lyme Clinic, the first floor was 3,000.
Huh. I would have said it's bigger, but yeah. Okay.
That's what I thought.
You know what Earl Strout's old building is? Do we know what that is?
I think that's enormous. I think that's like 11 or something.
Yeah, because
But I'm not positive. I didn't look that up.
I mean, that's an easy one to look at and try to get an idea from.
All right, I'll look it up.
So you think that might be less than 12,000?
I think it's a little less than 12,
No, I would say it's
but I've forgotten.
right. I forget too. I would have said more like 14.
Oh, you think it was 14?
Do you want me to try to figure it out? I can go on.
You mean you want to look it up now?
I could do that if it's
Okay, go ahead. And in the
Yeah.
meantime, I'd like to get other people's thoughts on that. Do we want to stay with the 12,000 building footprint, or do we want to go to 9,000 or 6,000 or what? If it was 6,000, it could only be, it would have to just go straight up. If it was 9,000, there could be some play, some flexibility.
It would seem that there's no question that putting a 12,000 square foot footprint right around the Lyme Common would really be out of place. I mean, you might be able to, do that out on Dorchester Road or further out around the Common. It would be pretty bad, I think.
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't know how big, the Stella's building is, but say you ballooned that on the first floor or something like that. I mean, took up some of the parking. That could be filled in, and it could look like porches or something. It wouldn't necessarily be bad. I know that that's a Saint-Croix, the former meeting house and all that, but I'm thinking about reuse of some of these buildings. 12,000 seems like a lot, and the footprint sounds better if it would be smaller.
I mean, they're still going to get 12,000 square foot
Of gross floor area. Right.
I'm back. I did get the Earl Strout's former building. The footprint is 14,124.
Good memory.
And the living area is 25,944 because he's got 2 floors there.
Right.
So
1,400. So knock off 15% or 14.2% of Earl's old building. That's enormous.
Yeah.
That's enormous.
right, although that would only be 1 floor. Uh,
Well, but that's really what we're talking about, because we're not changing, I mean, at least I'm not suggesting we change the 12,000 square feet. But that's exactly what we're dealing with. What if this was all on one floor?
So make the building footprint smaller and keep the gross floor area large.
Right.
Right, so what, I mean, if we took it, is 9,000 still too big, or should it be 6,000, or what does everybody think?
When do the height regulations kick in?
35, I think.
35-foot average height, which is 3 stories, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw another, it's good time to throw another wrinkle in. If you have 10 units at 1,200 square feet, you need at least 20% for what's called circulation, for hallways, stairways, that kind of stuff. And so that says that 10 units would be a lot more like 1,000 square feet.
I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with 10, it forcing 10 units to be 1,000 square feet. We'll make it more affordable.
And still have the average of 1,200 square feet, and leave to the developer the challenge of figuring out how to parcel them out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in
Okay.
some instances, I imagine, maybe the developer will have, this is a mixed use thing, so it's very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the developer won't want to build the senior housing to the max, and will have plenty of room to maximize the 1,200 limit. Anyway, I don't have any problem with the constraint of the needed excess area causing some of the units to be 1,000 square feet.
Okay. That brings up
So
another question, but we'll get there later. Go ahead.
What do we want to do? I mean, we don't have to decide at this minute, but let's start talking about, we can't go smaller, obviously, than 6,000 square feet. That's the minimum building footprint. But do we want to have 9,000? Do we want 8, 7, 9, 10?
8 might be a compromise.
8?
Yeah. I mean, that's still big for the right around the common, but of course, if you had 8,000 square feet and you had 2 floors, then you'd be 16.
You'd be 8 and 4.
8 and 4.
Yeah. Okay. So it'd be 12. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Eric and Vicky, what are your thoughts?
8, try 8. Why not? Part of the, the inn is at that 4728. That's for the first floor. That's big. It seems to me. But what makes it really big is the height, because that's a very tall building. So there's a lot of mass there. So if you were to have 8,000 and then like half that amount on the second floor, it wouldn't be quite as imposing.
Pond View is 72,
right.
So it's like Pond View with half on top.
Right, I know, and that's hard to gauge because it's set back so far from the road and you don't really see it as a pedestrian. So I have a hard time kind of like relating to that size, actually. Because I just drive by. So I'd be, willing to try 8 and, just work with that for the maximum footprint. That'd be fine.
Okay, so let's have that again as provisional, and we're going to incorporate these things and discuss some more.
Yep.
Okay, so IV, up to 3,000 square feet of covered parking dedicated solely to the senior housing residence shall not be counted as part of building footprint and gross floor area. So this is not required parking. It's if somebody did covered parking, it would not be counted.
Yep.
Everybody good with that?
And that could be attached or detached.
Right.
As it's written, it could be either.
Yep.
So if it's attached, we could, again, get the scale of the building back up to looking like 11,000 square feet in terms of floor area or in terms of footprint.
Well, even if it was detached, you'd still have.
Well, right, but this could be a garage, right?
Right.
Just a normal garage.
Yep.
So even if we knock the footprint down to 8, this allows it in a sense to go back up to 11.
That's true.
But I mean, who knows? It could be like Ray's, where he's got a terrace on the top. It's not at height that is right at the street front.
It could be, but this does permit a regular old garage, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
And how does the covered parking interact with lot coverage?
That would have to be waived by the planning board. That's one of those dimensional things, I think.
Okay. All right. And that
So I guess
you're going to work on that paragraph, Vicki.
So I guess that the planning board, based on the criteria, if the 3,000 square feet, just smothered the site, the planning board would have some control about that.
Yes.
Okay, so let's come back to that once Vicki rewrites D. Okay, F, senior housing may share a lot or building with other principal uses that are allowed in the Lyme Common Zoning District. The gross floor area of the senior housing dwelling units, common areas, and accessory buildings must exceed 70% of the gross floor area of the development on the lot in order for the planning board to vary the dimensional controls as described in D.
So this is the mixed use that you were suggesting would be available. And so how would that work?
Well, I'll read it to you again.
No. I mean, so you've got some senior units, and then I guess you've got some non-senior units.
Right. They could be commercial or residential.
Mm-hmm.
What the lawyer said is the senior units have to be entirely senior, but that we can have mixed use.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And
So you could have a
It's done.
grocery store.
What's that?
You could have 30% of it could be a grocery store on the first floor, say, for instance.
Conceivably, it could be, yeah. Any allowed use
Right.
of that district.
Right.
So if this was a 10,000 square foot building, it could be 7,000 square feet of seniors. It could be whatever that is, 5 senior units and 1 big residential unit. Is that
Right.
right?
Right. Or, you could have senior units, you could have regular residential units, and you could have a store of some kind or a salon or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
It's very open. All right. Anything on that?
But the,
Okay, G, parking may not be located in the front setback and shall be provided on site following the standards contained in Appendix A of the site plan review regulations. Okay, the
There's a
silence
note,
is,
I mean, this is part of the simplification that I'm wondering about. Do we even need to say that? Because Appendix A of the site plan review wouldn't permit
well,
parking in the front setback?
I don't know whether, I think this came out of the parking may not be located in the front setback. I don't know if that's in, I
No.
doubt that that's in the,
No, Appendix A doesn't say that. It just gives you how many spaces you need, multiple use of the same site, parking space size, that type of thing.
and is Appendix A a guide or a requirement?
It says the general guidelines regulating on-site off-street parking are as follows. So I would say they are general guidelines that the planning board can modify if they wanted to.
Okay.
It says right here, it says the general guidelines regarding, so they're not requirements. They're not called requirements.
So do we want to follow those guidelines or do we want to say that those guidelines, I mean, the way it's written here, parking may not be located in the front setback. I think we want to keep that.
Yes.
Apropos to what Rich is saying.
Yep.
And shall be provided on site. I think we want to say that. And then following the standards contained in Appendix A of the site plan review regulations. Do we need to have that?
If Appendix A doesn't say that, yeah, I mean, if Appendix A doesn't already say all that, then I guess I'm okay with leaving G substantially as it is.
Well, I think my question about Appendix A is that providing the planning board with flexibility? Because they're just guidelines. I mean, why are those? I'm assuming that it's providing flexibility. Otherwise, they just say, "Here are the standards."
Well, it's written in a flexible way in our site plan regulations.
So, do we want to have? Do we want to follow that, or do we want anything more specific?
I think we've got to be more. I think we've got to follow it because who knows what the situation is, especially with regard to the other use that might be there. If it is a commercial or, service type use, we're going to want to have parking that makes sense for whatever's going on the site. I mean, they have for multi-dwelling. They're for efficiency units, they're saying 1 parking space, 1 and 2 bedrooms, 1.5 spaces, 3+ would be 2 spaces. So, I mean, I think those are good guidelines to go with. If we find out that, well, I don't know. I think that those are reasonable guidelines to use.
All right, so do we want to keep that here just for clarity? I mean, Rich is suggesting that perhaps we don't need that because it's in the site.
I'm backing away from that, John. I had expected, I misunderstood what Appendix A might say.
Okay.
And it doesn't say it, and so I think G is fine.
What did you think it said?
I thought we were sort of replicating what was already in Appendix A. But Appendix A doesn't talk about front setback. It doesn't talk necessarily about it. So I think I'm okay with G as is.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. H. Is everybody done with G?
Yeah,
Okay. H. Any building deemed to be a contributing building in the Lyme Common Historic District may be developed as senior housing solely through repurposing of the existing structure.
right. John, I have somewhat of an issue with that. If it's solely through repurposing of the existing structure, I'm not sure what repurposing means. I mean, could you actually essentially tear change the whole outside of the building? Look, just take everything off and redo the whole building?
Well, it's a good question.
I mean, it's pretty vague. I think if our goal is to keep the historic value of the buildings that are contributing to the common district, I don't think this does that, actually.
So let's use the example of Ray's thing. I mean, he's using the conversion clause, but he's changing it in a very nice way.
Right. I mean, he's changing the whole inside. He's going to gut the building completely. The inside,
Right.
well, which is okay. But I think he's going to keep essentially keep the outside pretty much the same as it is.
Well, let me put it this way. Let's say that somebody bought one of the historic buildings,
Right.
and pretty much wanted to do what Ray wanted to do. What would your point of view be?
Well, in other words, let's say somebody bought the Greenleaf's house, Ben Killam's old house, which is probably the most historic house in Lyme. And they could actually, I think the way this is written, they could take off all the clappers, they could take off all the trim on the outside, they could change all the windows, they could change the roof line. They could essentially just, completely destroy that house. I think the way this is written, they could.
Well, let me just back up a little, because as of today in the zoning, our zoning regulations, they could tear down a house.
True.
I mean, anybody can do whatever they want on the Lyme Common right now. So
Right.
what we're trying to do here, I think, is at least, not encourage wholesale destruction. Maybe we need, I mean, I don't think we want to go too far with what people can't do.
Well, I'm just saying that if the goal is to try to keep the original look of the historic building, I don't think this does that.
Well, what does everybody else say?
Well, I think there's an essential tension here. Are we trying to promulgate senior housing, or are we trying to promulgate historic preservation? It's a hard choice.
I mean, Rich, the answer is there's always tension between goals. The question is how do we finesse the tension? And that's what I'm interested in, is finding the best way to accommodate both issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's the use of the board.
It depends how far we want to go. That's true. But I mean,
I would be concerned about going too far. I think the repurposing came, as I recall the discussion we originally had, we referred to it as can only be converted.
right.
And that became a legal problem because we already have a definition of conversion, and repurposing was another way of saying that.
Well, I think essentially it was saying that the building couldn't be torn down.
Right.
Start from scratch. But what I'm saying is, I think the way this is written is the end result would be the same as if you tore it down.
It could be.
So maybe we don't even, I mean, if we don't want to go too far, protect the building, maybe we don't even need this.
Well, I think we do, we do want to have something.
Yeah.
Vicky, Eric, what are your thoughts?
Well, if there's nothing else in the other parts of the ordinance, then this could be a disincentive to develop senior housing. Right? If I own the house, I can tear it down and build what I want. Or if I want to build senior housing, then I gotta keep the building.
Well, what if there's senior housing in White River Junction. I don't know whether you've seen the building, but supposing an equivalent building was built on the Lyme Common that was enabled, on this scale, that was enabled by the senior housing article.
Yeah, I guess we're talking about larger buildings. So,
Well, no, I guess just going to architectural style.
Right.
It's a fact that anybody can tear down and build anything around the common, and that I think addressing that should come in a historic district, more aesthetic regulation than trying to implement it through here. I think Eric's spot on, it being a disincentive to get our senior housing if these are the only people that have to comply with that kind of thought. And I don't think that this town would vote in aesthetic controls, architectural standards, or, keep the windows the way they are. I mean,
No, I don't either.
One of the first things that's going to go are the windows so that they become energy efficient. It's a sad thing. The fenestration may not change, but the window itself might very well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, however Vicky reworks D.
Well, it's not gonna say much more than it says. The point being made that you might not have on-site water supply. That's about all that it's.
Yeah, but what it does say is based on the character of the land and neighborhood.
Right. Which may or may not be, well enough represented in the site plan regulations. That's what I want to read into that.
Yeah. So, what I'm.
Okay. Well, what we have, remember, is from our preamble, we've got a new little I, which says the exterior appearance and massing of any structure associated with senior housing must be harmonious and consistent with the present character of the neighborhood.
I think that's the key thing.
Right.
I mean, speaking personally, my inclination would be I wouldn't want to go too hard on saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. But if somebody were to want to build just a clearly bananas senior housing, I don't know what, like all glass with jagged angles and, at least that clause would give us some standing.
Right.
But I really don't think in terms of preserving windows or clapboards, that we're going to be able, or even should, unless the town, which I agree with Vicky, I don't think the town would want to.
Yeah.
But unless the town wanted to create a historic district with legal architectural requirements,
Right.
I wouldn't want to go any further than this.
Right. No, I don't disagree, John. I mean, in a perfect world, it would be nice to be able to save the historic value of the houses around the common, but I agree that the town isn't going to vote for that. So I guess what I'm saying is this H doesn't really do much.
Well, the reason it's in there is because last year when we discussed it, everybody was on board.
Right.
But this is
I think we were just saying at that time that we didn't want somebody to completely tear the building down.
Right.
They needed to repurpose it. But in actuality, by repurposing it, they could make it as if it was torn down and build a new building. It would be, everything would be gone that was there originally. So I'm just saying that
So what is, when we say repurposing, does it really mean anything?
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it does.
What if we substitute that section, that sentence, or work that sentence from the preamble in here as an alternative to the repurposing language? I mean, I don't think we have a legal, I don't believe we have a legally enforceable historic district, because anybody can do anything they want.
Right. The historic
No,
district
I agree.
is an honorary thing. It's registered in Washington, but there's no
Right.
real
But
restriction.
Yeah.
And the only
No,
restriction
I mean, as I read this, I don't know that it means anything.
well, that's what I'm saying.
All right, so I'm going to circle this as something that we'll consider taking out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sad, I'm sad about that. I would like to be able to protect these buildings, but I don't, as you say, I don't think the town's going to vote for that. And I don't,
No.
and there's no way to do it really.
Okay.
Except through our site plan review, what Vicky was just reading, I think that will be the only control we have probably.
The only control we have, is site plan review.
Yeah. So that's.
All right, let's go to I. The owner of any senior housing dwelling unit is responsible for supplying proof of each of the residents' age to the zoning administrator by the last day of January of each year and whenever a new resident occupies a senior housing dwelling unit. Upon notification by the zoning administrator or any resident of the town of a failure to comply with this requirement, the select board shall be responsible for enforcement and shall take action within 14 days. This language, I believe, or at least the core of it, was taken from some other towns' enforcement, senior housing enforcement language.
What does, well, not that we can speculate, but I'm curious what Kevin thinks about this.
Yeah, he basically went along with it. He wasn't thrilled, but we can enforce it. And this way it's written that the select board shall be responsible for enforcement.
And what is the select board's action? I mean, what is their, what is it they are able to do?
Handcuffs, I think.
Yeah. I think that on spot. I don't want to even. Never mind.
They have, it's the land use citation. I think it's $375 a day from the day that you are told that you're in violation.
Yeah. So there is legal standing there, and we have to have an enforcement for something like this. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it.
Well, the point is that other elements of our land use regulations don't get enforced because it goes to the zoning administrator and then it needs to be backed up by the selectmen. And then in this case, it would go immediately to the select board for enforcement.
Yeah, this is what other towns have done.
Okay.
All right, all senior, this is J. All
Can
senior
we go back to
housing
the
must
wording?
comply with all applicable state and federal laws, including but not limited to RSA 354A and RSA 161M. As I recall, this was the legal language the lawyer gave us.
John, maybe I'm not looking correctly here, but I could not find either one of those RSAs in the land use regulations. There are no numbers.
That would be disturbing.
They're not in these books.
Oh, okay.
This
Okay.
is a digest of stuff that planning boards use, and the other rules are, not, those rules aren't in here.
Okay.
So
You can go to the general court and find them, I think.
Yes.
We know
If
what
you
they
Google
say.
RSA 354A, it'll pop right up.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and K, okay, this was a thing we dealt with last year, and it's kind of pathetic, but anyway, senior housing shall not be changed to any other use for 25 years after first occupancy. That was where it stopped originally. But then we were concerned about what if the builder goes bankrupt and the town is left with an empty building. So unless such change of use is first approved by the planning board, which basically means that, realistically, the 25-year requirement is meaningless, because on day one, the person could come in and ask the planning board to change it.
Right.
Can we list conditions under which the planning board is allowed to change it?
Yeah, I think, this was kind of a compromise thing. All of our, we have other, like, I think it's the affordable housing and something else, I forget which. They said, they give a date certain. It's got to be this way for X number of years. This was sort of a hybrid. So I think if we are going to have such change of use approved by the planning board, I agree with Eric. Let's say under what conditions the planning board would do that.
That strikes me as really hard, just to imagine what it could be.
I think it'd be hard too.
Yeah,
Which doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't try and do it.
Can't we just take out the 25-year part?
Well, yeah, we could. We can do it. We could do anything. But the point was, this is another, to use your phrasing, this is another area where there are two tensions.
Mm-hmm.
And one is that the whole point of this is to get a committed site to senior housing. And that's why the 25 years. I think in the affordable housing thing, it's 30 years. And in most towns, they just have a term of years, and there's no getting out of it. But we were concerned about what happens if there was a bankruptcy or a forfeiture or something.
Yeah, I think we need something, because what happens if developer builds it for senior housing and then a year later he decides that, he doesn't want, or he can't get enough seniors or whatever, and he wants to change it after a year, he could,
So, I guess, so what would happen in that situation? I think that's a ridiculous standard, is that a year later, actually, I don't want to do this.
Right.
It's absurd.
Right. That's why we need something.
We need something, because otherwise somebody could just say, well, I'm going to get all these benefits for senior housing.
Right.
And, actually, on the second thought, on day one, I'm just going to turn it into a shopping mall or whatever.
Right.
Well, I guess the worst case would be is allowing the additional density, and then they decide, well, it's actually going to be for younger people and not for people over 62. That's the kind of the worst case. It's still housing, but it's not for the target population that we're writing this for.
I think that could easily happen. The developer would say, well, it's so much easier to rent to everybody. So
I agree with Rich that it's difficult, but I think if we're serious about this being dedicated senior housing for the residents that are senior housing, that but we are concerned about contingencies where things go bad, we're going to have to we can't just, wash our hands of it. We're going to have to, if we're going to create an exit clause, we're going to have to create standards.
Right.
All right. So we pretty much, and the other thing I have, we did get feedback from town council.
John, I also had something I wanted to talk a little bit about point I again, when you get a chance.
Point I, okay. All right, let me just do this.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then we'll go to point.
And I've got a.
So I was,
Okay.
what's that?
After the I comment, I've got a comment on K.
All right, well, so anyway, I was tasked with, the whole reason this got held up last year was because the House Bill 1629, which was moving along before the COVID hit, basically said that any municipality that allows increased density, reduced lot size, expedited approval, or other dimensional or procedural incentives for housing for older persons, which includes seniors legally, that incentive shall be the same for all other houses. And then there was some discussion that it would be for workforce housing, but they never, I don't have a problem if it's for workforce housing, but they never finalized it. And so I assume it's going to come back. So anyway, I was tasked with writing something for town council to consider to see if we could put in a poison pill, which, I'm not happy about it, but I don't know what else to do. And the first draft was, should any state or federal law subsequently be established that requires any of the elements of the senior housing amendment to apply to any or all other types of housing, then the senior housing amendment will automatically and immediately be rendered void as of the date that the new law takes effect. And our legal counsel said that that is legal. It's not a great clause. I don't like having it in there. It's it's negative, but I don't want to have the state. The state is dealing with this. The reason the state is doing this, with my understanding, after having contacted our representatives at the time, is because in the southern part of the state, they just have tons of senior housing, and they want to get other types in there. That's certainly not the way things are here. We don't have any incentives for senior housing. So I think it would just be terrible if that was imposed by the state. But I really don't like this, putting this in there.
But it seems like we don't have any choice, right, John? If we want
We have a choice. We can just,
well,
we can
if we want to present to the town and hopefully get it passed, we probably don't have a choice.
So, John and actually Vicky, I want to drill down a little bit. You've both said the worst case and that it would be terrible to have younger people.
Actually, Rich, I'm going to correct you there because I didn't say that. I said you could end it. I said it could turn into anything, including a shopping mall. I did not say that.
Rich, I did say that, and the purpose of our evening tonight is to figure out how to provide an incentive for senior housing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how many times, actually, it's not just tonight, but many hours have been spent on figuring that out. It's not for general increasing density in our town, or for different groups of people. And so it's a waste of time. That's what my point is it's a waste of our time trying to craft this if it's going to go for the, any
Yeah.
occupant.
And I'm going to add on again, Rich. We have been down this road, and you keep bringing it up. I understand you have a different point of view, but I don't want to keep revisiting it. It's been rejected by the rest of the board, and we've answered that question so many times, and you know it. You know it, and you just keep bringing it up.
And John, I do, because I want to be very clear on the reason that it would be bad.
Your phrasing of it is so distorted, Rich.
Okay, and
It's not a question of what would be bad. It's what is the purpose of this? And we have been clear from the start, targeting seniors.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what would be bad about something else. It's what is the affirmative reason for this? Can I be any more clearer?
And so are we prepared to come back around and talk about increased density for other people in town?
I think that's the point of the build out in the southern part of the town. We stated that last year, as you also well know.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when you ask these questions, you're doing it, kind of legalistically so that you can basically misquote somebody and put a distorted position out, okay? And and having been on the receiving end of that, I really resent it. So I would say that the affirmative reason for this is to target senior housing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can reframe it to suit your purposes, but I find it frankly very disagreeable. Any other questions?
I had a question about K, kind of an addition. I wanted to say—
I'm sorry, which one? Which one?
On K, the little K, that I feel like I would like it to say building and structures used for senior housing shall not be changed to any other use for 25 years after occupancy unless such change is first approved by the planning board. Because it might be that we find out that the people who live there really don't need that much parking, and some of that parking could be dedicated for use for something else, for example.
Okay, so what was the phrasing?
It just would, at the beginning, it would say buildings and structures used for senior housing shall not be changed. So that you might be able to use, I don't know, some part of it for some other use with planning board approval, just to give people flexibility. Maybe there's a gazebo that, we really want to have school children use or something. I don't know. So
Anybody have a problem with that?
No.
just to be able to divide it out.
We need outdoor classrooms.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, so
And John, I did want to go back to I think I have some non-controversial thought there. The owner of the senior housing unit is responsible for certifying that the resident's age meets the requirements, not necessarily supplying proof.
so what does that mean?
I don't know, that the owner, I presume the owner in that would be the manager of, if this were an apartment building, it would be the manager of the apartment building would certify to Dave Robbins.
But what is that? I mean, the advantage of supply, I mean, I vaguely remember the discussion and why we came up with this. When you say certify, that's a very general thing.
Right, and just to say, yeah, everybody's above 62, as opposed to saying, yes, Fred is, born in 1933 and Mary is born in whatever.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's just an easier standard of proof.
Okay, how does everybody
just-
feel about that?
I don't feel strongly about it.
I'm not sure I know the difference other than that if it's just certify,
You're taking somebody's word for it.
mean, that needs to be brought to the zoning administrator in either case, right?
Right. And I think it's a little less invasive.
Well, I mean, there's nothing invasive about
It's not hard to photocopy it.
when you're getting, you're getting the advantage of a senior housing development with certain requirements, getting across going to town offices and affirming that you're, as they say, of a certain age doesn't strike me.
Oh, I see. So I misread. So this is the owner of a unit, so that if it's a
Right.
condo and I live
Exactly.
in unit 3, I got to go to the town.
Right.
And if it's an apartment building, who does that? Is that the apartment manager?
The owner
Is that
of any senior housing dwelling unit. So it would be the owner. So
So it
I
would be
guess
the-
if there was an apartment building, the owner of the apartment building would be responsible.
Okay.
I mean, we could say the owner or, I mean,
The owner's clear.
what's your concern, I guess?
Okay. It's fine.
Okay,
It's fine.
okay. Okay, anything else? So let's, Vicky, you're gonna redo that language.
I'll send it to David.
Okay.
Yep. I'll just
And
check
we're
it.
thinking of eliminating H. I'd like to discuss that with everybody here. We're going to change K. What did we decide with G? We're going to think about that some more, about whether we're going to keep the following the standards contained in Appendix A.
I thought we liked G.
Yeah, I think we all.
I like G.
Okay, so we're keeping G.
Yeah.
And we're moving the end, that exterior appearance thing to after H. And we provisionally decided 8,000 square feet for the building footprint, but I'd like to do that with the full board. So that's where we stand now, and we'll revisit it, and then maybe we can actually put this thing to bed somehow. I'd also ask everybody, whether it's the site plan review, I know we have a couple of things, site plan review or subdivision regulations or zoning regulations, where this is a really short year. I don't know, I definitely would like to get the senior housing thing done. But if there are any enormous things that people would like to deal with, we might be able to squeeze them through. So think about it. Yes.
Well, just to trying to get this vetted. I mean, I think we should start sooner rather than later. And, once we can agree on a draft to get, start it, getting it out into the public.
Absolutely. The
So
sooner the better. 'Cause we're really working. I mean, last year we had for Lyme, we had big crowds coming in and a lot of discussion. And it's going to be very hard to do under these circumstances. So the sooner the better. Maybe we can even have dedicated meetings just to the senior housing.
I think we should, especially because this is such a cumbersome way of interacting.
Yeah. And we'll just try to figure out the best way to have those meetings. All right, anybody got anything else? Thank you, as always, for working under these difficult conditions, and everybody go have some fun.
Thank you, John.
You are free.
Great. Bye, guys.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay,
All right, good night, all.
everybody.
Good night.